Welcome to the brief presentation of ISO 13485 requirements. We are going to discuss clause number 4.1 General Requirements. General requirements talk about the organizational requirements. The organization shall document a quality management system and maintain its effectiveness in accordance with the requirements of this international standard and applicable regulatory requirements. These are the requirements for development of the QMS. In detail, it asks you to establish your quality management system, QMS. Document your organization's quality management system. Maintain the effectiveness of your quality management system. Establish your QMS documentation requirements. Identify the documents that regulators expect you to maintain. Identify the medical device regulations that apply to your organization. Identify the roles that medical device regulators expect you to perform. Identify the documents that ISO 13485 expects you to maintain. Identify the procedures that ISO 13485 expects you to document. Identify the activities that ISO 13485 expects you to document. Identify the arrangements that ISO 13485 expects you to document. Identify the requirements that ISO 13485 expects you to document. The organization shall establish, implement and maintain any requirement, procedure, activity or arrangement required to be documented by this international standard or applicable regulatory requirements. The organization shall document the roles undertaken by the organization under the applicable regulatory requirements. The standard additionally says that roles undertaken by the organization can include manufacturer, authorized representative, importer or distributor. Standard asks you to clarify the structure. Consider the roles that regulators expect you to perform. Determine the processes that your organization's QMS needs. Clarify how QMS processes are applied throughout your organization. Specify how your organization's processes are interconnected. Use a risk-based approach to control your organization's QMS processes. So the organization shall A. Determine the processes needed for the quality management system and the application of these processes throughout the organization, taking into account the roles undertaken by the organization. B. Apply a risk-based approach to the control of the appropriate processes needed for the quality management system. C. Determine the sequence and interaction of these processes. In this clause, standard talk about support processes. Support each QMS process. Support QMS process operations. Support QMS process monitoring. Support QMS process measuring. Support QMS process analysis. Support QMS process record keeping. For each quality management system process, the organization shall A. Determine criteria and methods needed to ensure that both the operation and control of these processes are effective. B. Ensure the availability of resources and information necessary to support the operation and monitoring of these processes. C. Implement actions necessary to achieve planned results and maintain the effectiveness of these processes. D. Monitor, measure as appropriate, and analyze these processes. E. Establish and maintain records needed to demonstrate conformance to this international standard and compliance with applicable regulatory requirements. A. Evaluated for their impact on the quality management system. In this clause, standard talk about manage the changes. Manage your QMS processes. Comply with ISO 13485 process management requirements. Manage changes to your organization's QMS processes. Comply with regulatory process management requirements. Comply with regulatory change control requirements. The organization shall manage these quality management system processes in accordance with the requirements of this international standard and applicable regulatory requirements. Changes to be made to these processes shall be b. Evaluated for their impact on the medical devices produced under this quality management system. c. Controlled in accordance with the requirements of this international standard and applicable regulatory requirements. Standard talk about control outsourcing. Monitor outsourced processes that affect product conformity. Control the outsourced processes that affect product conformity. Retain responsibility for processes that affect product conformity. When the organization chooses to outsource any process that affects product conformity to requirements, it shall monitor and ensure control over such processes. The organization shall retain responsibility of conformity to this international standard and to customer and applicable regulatory requirements for outsourced processes. The controls shall be proportionate to the risk involved and the ability of the external party to meet the requirements in accordance with the controls shall include written quality agreements. The standard asks you to validate QMS software. Develop procedures to validate and revalidate your QMS software. Develop an approach that is proportionate to the risk that is being taken. Use your procedures to validate and revalidate software applications. Validate computer software applications for their intended use. Validate software whenever its intended use changes, as appropriate. Maintain a record of your software validation and revalidation activities. The organization shall document procedures for the validation of the application of computer software used in the quality management system. Such software applications shall be validated prior to initial use and, as appropriate, after changes to such software or its application. The specific approach and activities associated with software validation and revalidation shall be proportionate to the risk associated with the use of the software. Records of such activities shall be maintained. Documentation requirements. Standard asks you to manage the information. Include all required documents and records. Include the documents and records that regulations require. Include the documents and records that ISO 13485 requires. Include the documents and records that your organization requires. The quality management system documentation shall include a. Documented statements of the quality policy and quality objectives. b. A quality manual. c. Documented procedures and records required by this international standard. d. Documents, including records, determined by the organization to be necessary to ensure the effective planning, operation, and control of its processes. e. Other documentation specified by applicable regulatory requirements. Standard asks you to prepare the manual. Prepare a quality manual for your QMS. Define the scope of your organization's QMS. Outline the structure of your QMS documentation. Include your QMS procedures or refer to them. Describe how your QMS processes interact. Quality Manual. The organization shall document a quality manual that includes A. The scope of the quality management system, including details of and justification for any exclusion or non-application. B. The documented procedures for the quality management system, or reference to them. C. A description of the interaction between the processes of the quality management system. The quality manual shall outline the structure of the documentation used in the quality management system. Standard asks you to establish medical devices files. Establish a file for each medical device type or each family of medical devices. Include or reference documents showing that you comply with regulations. Include or reference documents showing that you comply with ISO 13485. Maintain a file for each medical device type or each family of medical devices. Include documents for each medical device type or family of medical devices. Include a description of each medical device type or medical device family. Include procedures for medical device types or medical device families. Include specifications or procedures for medical device types or families. Include records for medical device types or medical device families. For each medical device type or medical device family, the organization shall establish and maintain one or more files either containing or referencing documents generated to demonstrate conformity to the requirement of this international standard and compliance with applicable regulatory requirements. The content of the files shall include, but is not limited to, A. General description of the medical device, intended use, purpose, and labeling, including any instructions for use. B. Specifications for product. C. Specifications or procedures for manufacturing, packaging, storage, handling and distribution. D. Procedures for measuring and monitoring. E. As appropriate, requirements for installation. F. As appropriate, procedures for servicing. Standard asks you to control documents. Establish a procedure to control QMS documents. Document your QMS document control procedure. Implement your QMS document control procedure. Control your organization's QMS documents. Review and approve documents before you issue them. Provide the correct version of documents at points of use. Protect the identity and legibility of your QMS documents. Identify and control the distribution of external QMS documents. Prevent the unintended or inadvertent use of obsolete documents. Preserve obsolete documents for future reference and use. Documents required by the quality management system shall be controlled. Records are a special type of document and shall be controlled according to the requirements given in. A documented procedure shall define the controls needed to A. Review and approve documents for adequacy prior to issue. B. Review, update as necessary and reapprove documents. C. Ensure that the current revision status of and changes to documents are identified. D. Ensure that relevant versions of applicable documents are available at points of use. E. Ensure that documents remain legible and readily identifiable. F. Ensure that documents of external origin, determined by the organization to be necessary for the planning and operation of the quality management system, are identified and their distribution controlled. G. Prevent deterioration or loss of documents. H. Prevent the unintended use of obsolete documents and apply suitable identification to them. The organization shall ensure that changes to documents are reviewed and approved either by the original approving function or another designated function that has access to pertinent background information upon which to base its decisions. The organization shall define the period for which at least one copy of obsolete documents shall be retained. This period shall ensure that documents to which medical devices have been manufactured and tested are available for at least the lifetime of the medical devices defined by the organization, but not less than the retention period of any resulting record, or as specified by applicable regulatory requirements. Standard asks you to maintain records. Establish records for your organization's QMS. Develop procedures to control QMS records. Document your record control procedures. Implement your record control procedures. Define methods to protect QMS health records. Records shall be maintained to provide evidence of conformity to requirements and of the effective operation of the quality management system. The organization shall document procedures to define the controls needed for the identification, storage, security and integrity, retrieval, retention time and disposition of records. The organization shall define and implement methods for protecting confidential health information contained in records in accordance with the applicable regulatory requirements. Records shall remain legible, readily identifiable and retrievable. Changes to a record shall remain identifiable. The organization shall retain the records for at least the lifetime of the medical devices defined by the organization, or as specified by applicable regulatory requirements, but not less than 2 years from the medical device released by the organization. Thank you very much for your time and attention. Please give us your suggestions and feedback by an email.